The 16th of June 1900, fields of tears, hearts of iron. 125 years ago, on the bitter cusp of winter, the earth trembled not only with frost, but with footsteps of an empire. It was the 16th of June 1900, in the heart of the Second Anglo-Boer War. Though for the Transvaalers and Free Staters, it was simply the English War. Strangely, it was not a white man's war. The cold was merciless that year. Yet even that winter paled in comparison to what followed in 1901, a chill so deep and cruel it mirrored the days we ourselves now endure and will come upon all the earth. But in that war-torn time, it was not just the weather that brought suffering. It was the year 1900, and the proclamation 5 rang out from Lord Roberts, the Iron Hand of the Empire, general of its armies, came not merely to fight, but to crush. His mission, to grind the Boer republics, the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, into the dust. His orders were whispered from London elites, from the lips of Alfred Milner, who dreamt of banishing every Boer to far-off Mauritius, of wiping the Boer people from the land like chalk from a slate. And so the empire gathered its fury. From every corner of the globe, 500,000 men descended. Irish, Canadians, Indians, English, Scottish. Not only foreigners, but also the Cape Dutch, Black Africans and Cape Coloured, all conscripted or enticed to serve under the Union Jack. This war was no longer a frontier conflict. It was the First World War in all but name. But the Boers did not break. With desperation as their compass and the veld as their shield, they birthed a new kind of warfare, guerrilla warfare, strike and vanish, hit and hide. It shook the mighty British Empire to its knees. The Lion of England, for all its claws and teeth, was outwitted by Boers on horseback. Enraged, humiliated, and denied a swift victory, Lord Roberts turned his wrath not to soldiers, but to those left behind. He ordered the burning of farms. He came for the women and children. The stakes were greater than politics or pride. Beneath Boer soil lay treasure, gold, diamonds, wealth that fed the ambitions of world rulers and round-table men. The Boers stood between empire and its prize, and so their families paid the price. Women whose husbands were still in the field were rounded up and dumped into the scorched horror of concentration camps. Others, those whose men had laid down arms or who refused to fight, were placed in refugee camps free to come and go. They were called joiners and traitors. Black Africans too were taken, but to labor camps, called workers, not prisoners, yet held all the same. Their loyalty bought them shelter, warmth, food. For others, Boer women, children, there was only dust, disease, and death. The Boer their camps, no toilets, no fire, dirty water, no blanket, no rest. Women bled without dignity. Children coughed until their lungs collapsed. They slept on the ground, shivering in the dark. And while the joiners lit their fires and ate their bread, they turned their eyes away. Is this where false piety first took root in our land? If I'm blessed, God must be with me. Where comfort learned to forget the cries of the afflicted. As pressure grew from the Round Table, from the Queen and her generals, the empire abandoned even the pretense of mercy. Calculated, ruthless, vengeful. And in this dark theatre, monsters stepped forward. Lord Kitchener, General Andries Cronje, Olof Berg, and his black commandos, whose name should never be uttered without shame, defiled married women and violated young girls. Those who resisted were shot, stabbed, or left to bleed out in camps without medicine. Old women, grey with wisdom, were treated no better. All suffered alike because the God of Heaven had once defeated the Freemason God of the Empire, at Majuba and again in the First Anglo-Boer War, and will soon again defeat the Freemason God. Could you imagine then what they whispered into the ears of our mothers and daughters, while taking what was not theirs to have? Where is your God now? Where is your husband to save you? Where is your father to protect you? From men like us? Those questions echoed not just through the tents of the camps, but through history itself. And now, 125 years later, the wind still carries them. They came not as custodians of order, but as architects of extinction. More than 150,000 Boer women, children, frail burghers, and stooped elders were herded behind barbed wire, flung like unwanted chattel into what the empire called concentration camps, and what history now names, without flinching, murder camps. The British Blue Book, like the clandestine Freemason Bible, reads as a dark gospel, an unholy ledger laid at the feet of the father of lies, the empire's own ledger of acceptable truths, admitted to barely 12,000 deaths. Yet the years have peeled back that lie like rotten cloth. Testimonies, burial rolls, and Hobhouse's dog-eared notes drag the tally ever upward, bracing close to 42,000 lives, each one a lamp abruptly snuffed. But death did not come swiftly enough to satisfy the empire makers and their Cape Dutch accomplices. Food was laced with poison. Shards of glass, rust-flecked fish hooks, and razor-thin blades were kneaded into bread and meal. Survivors remember the metallic crunch between a child's teeth, the sudden scarlet bloom in a basin of porridge. Camps were planted in the lowest, wettest ground. British troops washed upstream, soap, sweat, and excrement swirling into the watercourses that trickled down to women already delirious with fever. Dysentery, typhoid, measles, invisible armies that required no rifles, only the empire's calculated indifference. Emily Hobhouse crossed the barbed thresholds, counted the graves, and wrote the truth in ink that burned. For her courage, they branded her mad, plotted to lock her in an asylum, and tried to drown her warnings in bureaucratic noise, yet she would not be silent. Make no mistake, this was genocide, a deliberate purging of the Boervolk for their faith, their stubborn hope in God, and the stubborn gold-rich earth beneath their feet. Modern slogans that sneer, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," are but embers compared with the roaring furnace stoked in those camps. There, amid poisoned loaves and plague-soaked blankets, the empire waged a war against a people's very right to exist. The 31st of May, 1902, the Treaty of Vereeniging. On that bleak winter's eve, the pens of exhausted generals scraped across parchment and birthed the Treaty of Vereeniging. Its clauses, solemn promises of restitution, respect, and restoration of the Boer republics, were trumpeted as the empire's word of honor. Yet the ink was scarcely dry before Britain's resolve evaporated. Those pledges were broken, scattered like ash on the wind. The genocide of the Boervolk did not end with the treaty's signature. It merely changed its mask. It seeps on, slow, silent, relentless, into our own century. And so we, the Boervolk, still stand upon the graves of our ancestors, demanding what is rightfully ours. The price we have paid is written in crimson across the veld, blood for a birthright that was never Britain's to barter. Over a third of our people, our folk, was swallowed by flame, famine, and the cold steel of empire. Children who never tasted adulthood, mothers whose final embrace was around the lifeless bodies of their young, fathers who trudged home to find only ash where once stood a farmhouse, fertile soil, and the promise of children raised beneath God's blue sky. Shall we forget? Shall we let the smoke that drifted from burning homesteads fade from memory, silence the cries that trembled through barbed wire, or muffle the prayers murmured over shallow graves? Shall we forget?